Michael Uhl and Kathy Fay of I Heart My Home. Take it away.
So thanks everyone for joining. I am going to try and cut through a lot of kind of background that you've probably heard about the program, but I'm going to let Kathy explain kind of the intent of what we were formed for, and then from there I'll talk to some specific examples, how we work with a customer and kind of explain some of that process, and then we'll talk a little bit about the bigger picture and have some Q&A. So.
All right, so sorry, I'm just need to toggle to the other screen. There we are. So oh wait, did I share that or did you share that? I'm sorry, guys. I'm looking at multiple screens and I'm a little confused where we are.
I'm sharing it, Kathy.
Okay, so so this is kind of an overview of what it looks like in this country in terms of the percentage of household income spent on household energy bills. And on the left-hand side, you see everybody's kind of in the same boat, this light blue map. And those are households that have a combined income that's 4 times higher than the federal poverty level. And it shows a mostly uniform distribution across the United States. So households in that income bracket typically spend only 1 or 2% of their income on household energy. And even if you add in everyone above the federal poverty line, the map doesn't get all that more exciting. In all 50 states and Puerto Rico, households above the poverty level spend about 2 or 3% of their income on energy. But once you look at the map on the right, things look a lot more different. And you can see that households below the federal poverty level, which is the map on the right, the burden balloons to 10% up to 26%. So 10% of household income is also an important threshold because that is often used as a delineation for energy poverty. And as you can see, Connecticut is about as extreme in that direction as you can get. And then remember that Connecticut, showing in that dark blue, that's an average for the whole, that's a number for the whole state. So really when you see, when you're actually here in Connecticut, you see that the clusters are even more intense in certain municipalities, both urban and rural. And this is why we really wanted to do this program. So we offer it to everyone, homeowners, renters, low-income people and high-income people. And I think you could move to the next slide.
Is it possible to make the slides bigger?
You can scroll, Kenny, on your meeting. You can scroll so that or you can hide us and make the slides bigger. Did you figure out how to do that? We'll wait for you. All right, let us know.
Sorry. Yeah, I got it.
You got it? Okay. Do you want to see the previous slide one more time? Okay.
And I'll share, there'll be a way that you can see some of this. This is all going to be recorded too.
Okay, so now part of why we want to help with everybody is because, again, you can see on these maps that owners have higher energy burden than renters, even in Connecticut. So even although in Connecticut it's expensive, the energy bills are expensive for renters, it's even worse in the owner occupied properties. Both single family and larger. Okay, so we really wanted to address these needs. And it's surprising about the owners because they're more likely to live in their home for a long periods when investment in efficient appliances or home insulation would pay off. And so is it a question of lack of capital? Is it a question of, what exactly is driving this kind of disparity for the owners? And so another reason we wanted to engage in this is to gather data and really understand what's going on in Connecticut. Besides the fact that our energy costs are higher here than most places. All right,
Thanks,
I'm going to
Kathy.
kick it over to Mike now.
Now, making the default decision the best is difficult, and especially in a market where you have a single, typically one decision maker for a single family home, but in many cases, referring to the rentals and multifamilies, there's multiple decision makers. So how do we address that? So these are the big high level premises, how we started, so that we can address the energy, the equity, the environment, make it trusted, available to all, and affordable. Right. So in your initial comments, all about electrification, cost was often included, but also how do you find the right way or the pathway for that individual? So we developed this program. It's essentially the Energy Concierge service that's been noted in some of the PURA dockets. And it's really meant to help explain by an independent third party what can happen for a home through all the myriad of programs. Okay. I'm going to skip a lot of context about who we are, as you guys have heard of us or know of us. But I do want to focus on a specific resident experience. So I'm going to, in this example, the process is just really repeated of counseling, consulting with us, identifying what the actual technical solutions are, identifying the financial resources that are available, either through grants, rebates, low interest loans, or some other means, and then support and execution with contractors through completion of the project. And then we repeat through as many steps as possible. So we make that available, and I'm going to talk about one example of a landlord, owner-occupant. You can see kind of the description to the bottom right of what their demographic kind of looks like. And then to the left are all of the various projects that were either completed or in process, right? And so this was this is a 4-family property in the New Haven area, and really it happens over multiple years. Right? I think it's important to know that this is not a short process. It's not that it happens within 6 months. It's something that takes multiple steps and multiple technologies, right? And the reason it takes longer is because we don't want to throw money at problems that might be more easily addressed and comfortable for the owner to address over a longer period of time. That could be because financial constraints. It could be because there's so much that goes into managing multiple scopes of work at the same time. If anybody's had to have a bathroom refinished at the same time as changing like an HVAC system or getting new appliances. So we want to manage the felt experience of the customer significantly. And in doing that, one thing that we can do is expand the timeline to help make sure that we maximize the use of equipment to its end of life, but then also are making an opportune intervention, right? So in this case, participant came to us, asked for help, and we went through kind of the initial HES steps with all 4 apartments. In doing that, we quickly identified that hybrid water heaters would be a great mitigating step for them, both to reduce their energy consumption, right, for each of the tenants. But also we were able to get that dehumidification of the basement that was really needed, given that it was a historic home built in the mid 1800s and had reason for significant dehumidification there. After doing more intensive air sealing, we then were able to move towards how do we make the most of the existing system in those furnaces. And that's what helped identify that AeroSeal or advanced duct sealing, as it's called by the utilities, was a great solution. Not only did it solve for reducing their oil consumption in all of the spaces, but also it prepared them if they wanted to move to a ducted heat pump, right? So if we start pushing cold air through those spaces, we want to be very sure that it's reaching the rooms and not getting stuck in the walls, right? So we did the right kind of diagnostic testing to show the benefit to this customer and the tenants. And then we were able to spread that across multiple iterations, right? So that it would be convenient for the tenants and cost affordable to them. Because of the massive amount of leakage, it was largely subsidized. So there really wasn't as much of a cost to the homeowner, right? So these are the kinds of steps that we take to suddenly make it more affordable for a historic 1800s-ish home to really look at electrification as a viable option, okay? What was interesting and what I think is often more challenging for customers to interpret is really the performance data that comes from these results, right? So one of the examples is through advanced duct sealing, we were able to identify which units were able to seal better than code and which units still had some leftover, right? They're still weren't reaching code standards. And the reason that's significant is because in the cooling season, there's a potential that there can create a condensing in certain areas. Like it's frankly because there's a disconnect in the ductwork that's hidden in walls made of plaster, and you would never really know otherwise. But in this case, it alerted us to the fact that we need to be mindful of the cooling that's used and the potential for mold growth in the walls. And so that was something that we were involved in and helped identify, and it helped us kind of aim at what spaces we need to be looking for. And even in new customers now, we're able to use some thermal imaging to go back and diagnostically see in certain seasons, either in the cooling or the heating season, to know where are the duct runs disconnected so that we can then get the right contractors back in. In addition to that, so there are some health and safety barriers that were kind of found along the way. Some of it electrical, some of it related to lead. And through this, we were able to get them connected to the right programs in the state that would provide some additional funding for addressing those concerns. Okay. We do have some still significant projects ahead, largely having to do with the re-roofing and making that ready for solar. So you are welcome to ask questions along the way. By the way, if you want to stop me or ask something, I'm also going to make sure there's time at the end for Q&A. So I'm going to show 3 graphs. This is the same kind of data analysis that we do for every one of our participants. And in this way, it allows us to understand what is the pathway that they have to reach their goals. Some people want net zero home. Some people want just more comfortable. Some people want lower bills. But whatever that is, we can show how the data of their home stacks up, right? And how those transitions through technology. So it's a little bit of a cumbersome graph, but you can see how going from left to right, the original home had a high consumption, was rated very high on the energy index. And as we proceeded to the right through iterative steps, we kept decreasing that energy rating index and improve that score. But then as you look at this slide, improve the costs, right? So the annualized costs kept decreasing. And you see that purple bar disappear because that's the oil bar. And so as those units switched from oil furnaces with no air conditioning, we switched them to heat pumps, high efficiency heat pumps that now provided centralized cooling and heating. And what is not as clearly shown here is that they had a huge step change in comfort at the point of removing these oil furnaces, because they now have centralized cooling as opposed to window units. And that isn't captured in these bills. It just shows that the energy usage modestly increased comparatively. Okay. Similarly, this is the carbon impact. You can clearly see what the step change is as they move to heat pumps, dramatic reduction.
Before you move on, Mike, can you address the black line, the PV line?
Yeah, so the PV line is, or the black line is representing how much energy offset would occur with the PV system sized as we think could fit on the roof, right? So based on those constraints, the black line shows how much could self-produce and how much of their carbon could be offset. So it's not going to get us quite to zero emissions. We would have to pull on a few more levers to really do that. And there's some limitations just of a historic brick exterior home that minimize the ability to add insulation in the walls. But to get from, you know, an order of 56 to basically 7.7 or 7.2 is, you know, that's a magnitude of difference, you know, really within striking distance of net zero. Okay. So that's one example I worked through in the details. We have in the chat, Kathy's going to mention another customer that we did a quick summary on. You can always read that article. Similar experience in terms of the depth of the electrification, but with a few other things. So that customer will be going through the energy efficiency, or sorry, the energy storage incentive program when it starts in January, and will be or is a low moderate income customer that went through the HES-IE version of this electrification. So the customer I presented was a HES customer, or what they might call a market rate, and then we've done the similar thing with a low to moderate income customer. At this point, I want to pause and see if there's questions.
Mike,
So go ahead.
Bernie, can I ask one question? In this case, was it a complete 100% switch out to heat pumps, or did you keep the supplemental oil in there?
So in this case, good question. It is not supplemental. So this customer went, so it showed on the slide, it's a little hard to understand, but there's 3 units that switched to full heat pumps right away, all backup resistance heat and you know, those centralized systems. There's one that still exists as a oil furnace because that equipment was not at the point of failure and it wasn't at the point of replacement. But when it is, it will be replaced with similar equipment, probably the better version at the current time. But that should happen within the next couple of years. And so in that regard, there was not an oil furnace backup or oil furnace to be provided in with a heat pump to make it what's considered a hybrid heat home, because the cost of oil and the system themselves with the tanks and leakages and the concerns with managing that was one of the concerns that the customer had. Wanted to just be off of oil, no more fill ups, just get it all out of the basement, get rid of the tanks, everything. So does that make sense?
It does, and it sounds like resistance heat is the ultimate backup.
It does, and if you look at the sized appropriately, it's a great piece of equipment. Does its job for the right supplemental needs, and in the future of a well-balanced, well-ventilated home, it can provide for what's called a reheat service, so that it can also better manage humidity in both the cooling season, but also in the heating season. And so with the addition of systems that will start to have humidification, you inherently actually want the backup resistance heat in there as a feature, right? Because it provides that function that you can't get with only the heat pump and some other backup heat source.
How big of a generator would they need to run this when it's 0 degrees outside, when the grid is down?
How many if I understand the question, how many generators do they need if the grid is down?
No, how many kilowatts do they need in the generator? Do they need like a 20 kilowatt or 50 kilowatt generator? to keep the house from freezing when it's 0 degrees out?
No, so there wouldn't, so there's currently not a generator there. So they don't have any backup generation to compare against. In the case of the backup resistance portions of their systems, each of them would have had maybe a 5 to 10 kW backup resistance heat, and that would only come on in the coldest hours of the year. So maybe on an order of 50 hours. And that's usually when people are asleep. So, and that's when most other things aren't operating at the home. So usually people don't have the lights on when they're sleeping. They usually don't have some of the other services. So to keep that home powered though, that I'm not sure that they, in the scenario where someone wants to have solar panels and energy storage or just a generator to power their own home, usually they don't try to power the entire home if it's not what we would call a critical load. Okay, and so most of those backup resistance heaters would not be included. And so then you could have a generator or an energy storage and PV system handle that pretty affordably.
No, I think you're wrong on that. I think they are critical loads. I mean, how can you sleep comfortably if the house is not heated?
So let me just break in here for a second, Phil. Two things. One is that this particular customer lives very close. You know, we're based in New Haven, although we serve the whole state. And this particular customer lives close to the hospitals on the same, I forget what they're called, but the same little part of the grid. And so typically our power in that area gets restored first. If there is a power outage, it's usually very brief. That's not really useful for people in the rest of the state, but in the example that, and this customer doesn't have their solar installed yet, so they don't have the option of having the solar backup, the solar storage. The next customer, the customer in the link that I shared, is going to be one of the first customers to participate in the Solar Plus storage when it rolls out this January.
Yeah,
I hope.
Realize that for specific examples, don't worry about backup. But my question is more in the general that I think it's for half the people maybe you want to leave the oil furnace there when you put in your heat pumps.
And so just one more response to you, Phil, is that one of the special aspects about of I Heart My Home is that we are not offering and suggesting the same solutions to every customer. We work with each customer and each house as its own project that has different needs. So just because we're doing things one way with this example, which we wanted to show you because it's a little more complex than some of the other examples we might have shown you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the same decisions would be made for another customer. And also at each step along the way, the customer is in the driver's seat. So we give them the information that they need to make the right decision for themselves and their house. And so I also wanted to point out, Mike, that Peter Millman has his hand up.
I got it. And just to round that up, and then Peter, you're next. The intent is not to, and I want to clarify a misconception that some people have, which is that at low temperatures, that heat pumps don't work. That's not true. So heat pumps still work. They still provide heat. They don't provide it at the same volumes or amounts as they do at slightly higher temperatures. But the backup resistance heat doesn't have to be the thing that provides energy or heat for the home at low temperatures. And in fact, mini splits are a case in point example of technology that can provide very high output with no backup and do that at extremely low temperatures, like -15. So I just want to clarify that heat pump technologies work at those points. So
So
Peter, go ahead.
Sure. Just by the way, I was listening to something earlier today that said that Mitsubishi has announced that it is coming out with a unit that will work down to that at -5 degrees Fahrenheit, it'll still have a COP or an efficiency of 1.8. So even at that temperature, it would not have to go to resistance heat mode. But that's not what I wanted to say. So Mike and Kathy, how did the owner deal with the split incentive dilemma of the owner is paying for the improvements, but presumably, but maybe not, the tenants are paying for their utilities and they're the ones who are going to have lower bills. How did that all work out?
Yeah, so a very important point. And it's this is also similar to what were her goals in addressing these. So the customer wanted to spread some of that risk out, right? Both in terms of doing some of these things that haven't been done by many other landlords, but also for fixing problems that really aren't something she'll see in the energy bills. So there's a couple of ways that we could address it. Part of it is mitigating risk. So there were risks with the home after, generations living there and its history that we wanted to address. So some of that had to do with electrical infrastructure. Some of that had to do with dehumidification of the basement to mitigate for mold or moist conditions and minimize those risks. Some of it was frankly, addressing energy consumption in her own space, as well as house meters, okay? Then there was some of the services that she was willing to transfer into part of a lease, such as including hot water, something of that nature, if she was able to do it at a very affordable and predictable price. And that was very interesting to her, because now she knew she had both really good equipment that could give her information on her cell phone while knowing basically when people are using hot water, but also knowing she's doing it at the lowest price possible. So we did a lot of that effort first for things that I think are right in the sweet spot for a landlord. And then there are other efforts that were more about how do we make sure that our tenants are going to like being here and or make this very rentable if they decide to leave. So providing centralized cooling was one feature that was really important. And that was not a hard decision, because it was either the furnaces need to be replaced one way or another. So it was a question of, am I going to replace with this other oil system that is problematic, or do I get this other equipment that makes it very rentable? And so that became a more straightforward question, so long as we could combine it with other rebates and other features, okay? It also gives a little bit more visibility into the actual property and its use because of the Wi-Fi thermostats and the ability to actually know a little bit more, like when do filters need to be changed for the equipment, and it'll help track that, right? So it helps expand, in a sense, the smart home functionality and gives her a little bit more remote monitoring in a way that's not intrusive and helps her, protect the investment she's made in that equipment. So do those examples help, Peter?
Yes. Sometime I'd be curious to hear more. Because, on larger building, on larger residential rentals, I think that split incentive is just a really big thing. And whether partly it sounds like this was solved because of the values of the owner, but when is it solved for people who or for owners who don't really care that much about the sustainability emissions issue, but just want to, it's an investment, period.
Yes, it is. There are different ways that we've handled it. So I'll give you one more example, and then there might be other questions. So there's another recent customer that we had participate through the Middletown Heat Smart program, who's working with us, and they have an interest to, frankly, upgrade their owner occupied space. And what they found through consultation with us is that actually, because of the way their home is set up and because of how they might qualify for HESI incentives, because of the tenants that are renting in the rest of the building, other upgrades could be made at low or no cost. They weren't the upgrades that the landlord had intended to make, which would have been for their own unit. And instead, they're looking at this as an opportunity to both improve the tenant space, get equipment that otherwise would have become obsolete and needed replacement anyway, but also leverage the funds that are available. So now it makes a potential oil replacement of equipment funded largely through the utility programs, insulation that can serve the entire building, not just the tenant space, and mitigate some of that risk for combustion gases, which was a concern, and also adds that dehumidification to a basement. So there are ways to address it. It depends a lot on the situation of that landlord.
So Mike, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in, but I'm gonna read you Melissa's question in the chat. She's wondering whether anyone knows if a homeowner has a mini split setup that was installed before the cold climate high efficiency ones came into the market. Are there ways to upgrade the homeowner's existing systems?
Good question. Sounds pretty specific.
Yeah, I don't want to actually. I didn't want to derail the whole conversation with that because it's not really about your program. So if anybody has thoughts, you can talk to me offline.
Okay, well that's a great segue. So I'm putting a link in the chat, and Melissa, if you click that link, you can become an I Heart My Home customer.
That's right.
No cost to you.
Oh,
You
sweet.
get answers,
Yes.
all the answers you need for your specific.
Oh, I'm there. I am so there.
Okay. Now, in context of these examples and kind of the opportunity for people to sign up, again, no cost, free residents of the state. I want to put this in perspective of some other things going on around the country. One is that there is really an emphasis for heat pumps, and they're looking at federal policy, and you may have seen it through the 3H clasp policy mention, basically trying to eliminate air conditioners. It's a device that only has one function, whereas it could be multiple functions when you switch to a heat pump. It basically raises the minimum floor of what could be done, and emphasizes those supply chains to drive down costs. So valuable to keep in mind and to know that that may be something that again helps minimize the concern of missing replacement times with customers. It would still allow a lot of people to keep their fossil fuel existing system in place if they want, but also at least begs the question or forces a conversation to say maybe they go full electrification. And then the other is just in context of Connecticut. Many of you are aware of lots of grants that are being offered right now for community partnerships. And this kind of experience is largely what we do with customers across the state. And that's what some municipalities have asked to work with us on. The reason that I think that's useful, not just from the individual customer experience, but is some of the data that we can pull and collectively look at that otherwise was very oblique or opaque to us, because we've been advocates in the energy efficiency or renewable space, but we haven't had the individual customer data to know what was accomplished. And how do those projects track over their life cycle? And so now we're able to start getting much more granular experience of when did a HES customer enter the system, when they've participated with us, who have they worked with, and what other scopes of work are they eligible for, such that we can start making not only municipal planning or local community planning, but also put them on a trajectory to follow up with for some of these services when they otherwise might get lost in the system. So in that way, we're being able to follow up with PV customers to make sure that they're aware of the energy storage incentives. We're able to also understand kind of the level of participation and movement that we're getting in, for example, if you look at the upper left slide of how many HES-IE customers versus HES, right? So you can see it's kind of like a 60-40 split in terms of HES or HES-IE. And
I don't think you're showing that slide right now.
do people not see a picture of 6 or 9 graphs?
Nope.
Nope.
On the more customer savings shared goals.
Okay. Apologies for that. Bear with me. How about this? So when it comes to data, this is what I was referring to. Apologies. But now we can much more quickly see what customers are participating, where is that happening across the state. And you can see clearly there's some municipalities who have had an outsized impact with, at least with us. And then we can understand some demographics and then certainly how word of mouth or has been affecting our program, right? So, and I can, there's a lot of different pieces to this, but I'll just go back up to look at, you know, how many have actually had HES in the last 2 years. You can see it's saying closer to 16% of the people who have worked with us, as opposed to the 84 that haven't. And that's, you know, in terms of this group, I know you have, we have a strong affinity towards those 80% goals. So how do we make sure that that happens? You know, this is one of the ways we can track. Let me pause. It's past 7. Patrice, I'd like to turn it over to you unless there's any more questions.
Maybe people could put their questions in the chat and then we'll see if we can't get answers emailed to you. Thank you so much, you guys. That's amazing. Wow. Can you tell Eversource, you know, to shape up and, well, never mind. So I wanted to thank both of you, Kathy and Mike. We didn't see everybody last month because we were all, you know, trying to be on vacation or something. The next topic we wanted to talk about briefly is the community partnership for energy efficiency engagement initiative that some of us are applying for money for. So I wondered, can anybody who's sending in an application raise their hand, please? Bernie, Westport, is Westport doing it? And Branford, okay, good. I'm doing one for Wilton, and Clean Water Action is doing one for Waterbury. So looks like we've got 6 or 7 among this group. Is Marty still on? I think I heard from Kathleen Shoemaker that Hamden is submitting an application as well. So I wonder how many are doing goal 1 for HES? Okay, Waterbury and Bernie, yep. And HES-IE, is anybody doing a HES-IE one?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, Mike's saying yes, and Kathy, yes. Cool. And then with the third one was the rebates and insulation for deeper retrofits. Anybody doing that one? Yeah, yeah, a lot of head nodding there from Kathy and Mike. And I'm doing one for the small business energy advantage, and I think Branford as well. You got your application in like months ago, Dan, didn't you? Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting, you know, because because when they first launched this program, Energy ICT, the Energy Efficiency Board said, well, we'll set aside $250,000. And we were like, what? For 169 towns? And so they said, oh, okay. Well, we'll set aside 500,000. But, given the difficulties of when the launch happened and other complications, I'm just wondering how many of those encumbered dollars, will actually be applied for. It'll be interesting. And what they will do with the money that is not applied for. So that remains to be seen. One thing that I think Anne and I will urge Eversource and UI to do is to post a frequently asked questions PDF on the website, because I think many of us have the same questions. So anyway, it'll be very interesting to see. The Energy Efficiency Board meeting is on the 13th of October, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the companies say when Amy McLean says, how many applications did you receive? So that'll be interesting. Who would like to speak to this program? Anybody have comments or regrets or other thoughts?
Yeah, Patrices, Bernie, I'll make a couple comments. First, I think it's the first time out of the gate for them, and I don't think some things I think are kind of questionable, like having it be a whole year long is one thing.
Yeah.
The way I think both Clean Water and PACE commented that dishing the dollars out 20% up front, 65% in the middle, and whatever's left at the end is hard, because most of these campaigns you want to get off with a pistol shot, and then it gets easier from then on. So that's, and I also would say in some regards, it's not clear how the money relates to the size of the town. They just have it in generalities. So I'm very much thinking this is round one. I hope they learn a lot from what they see from all of us on this call, perhaps some others that are out there. So that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So in case you're wondering about I Heart My Home and what we're up to with this, I just want to let folks know we are partnering with with several of the applications. So we're not necessarily, we're not doing a big New Haven application or something like that. We're providing some of the we're providing the I Heart My Home services to some of the towns that are submitting applications as part of their application. So if you're curious whether for this or for anything else, the way that we recommend, the process we recommend is to sign up and become an I Heart My Home customer so that you understand it firsthand. And that way you can decide whether it's for your town, whether with the community partnership program or any other program, any other outreach effort.
Kathy, I was thinking of doing that, but I felt that I would be siphoning off your talents and your vendors, too selfishly, that they're needed elsewhere.
Well, that's really that's really caring of you, Patrice. And I just want to underscore the fact that nobody is taking anybody's slots. There are no slots. On the other hand, for the HES and HES IE vendors, there is a backup. A few more signups isn't going to change anything materially around that backup. That's a matter of massive workforce development and deployment. So, so don't feel bad about taking us, about becoming an I Heart My Home customer.
I got halfway through the sign up process on your website, and then I thought, oh, I feel too guilty. So I'll continue. All right.
No, if anything else, I mean, I would say that we love working with friends. We want you, of anybody, right, to be able to enjoy your home, to be comfortable in it, and to be proud of it. So I encourage anyone in this network to make the most of it. It's a free program for you.
Cool.
So
That's
Uh,
great. Well, you
Patrice,
guys, I don't know how you go ahead, Bernie. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, I'm not as nice a person as you, so I didn't care if I was taking somebody else's slot. It's kind of like a status thing. I wanted to take somebody's slot, but kidding aside, I really think the process is good, and I also don't think I could have explained it. I still probably can't explain it as well as I should be able to, but it is one of those things that you have to experience there's not something else you can point at that is like what Kathy and Michael are doing. And so I think it's good to eat a little bit of the cooking, and then you can recommend the restaurant.
Yeah, the Energy Concierge term, the first I heard that, I thought it was, on a deep, at a deep meeting. But maybe it's a broadly used term nationwide, or maybe you guys came up with it and deep copied it. But I mean, it's a perfect description for what you do.
I'm not sure if that was the word sleuthing of some of our colleagues in this meeting, Bernie, or how that got into the GC documents, but I'm pretty sure some of those late nights and big brainstorm sessions is what pulled it together.
Cool. Very good. Well, I think Bob Wall is on. I just wanted to announce a couple of electric vehicle events. Bob, did you want to say a few words about your thing this Saturday?
So turn the lights back on. Thanks, Patrice. Town of Fairfield will be holding its 7th annual Green Wheels Expo. This originated as part of the National Drive Electric Week. And my understanding is that Fairfield has one of the largest in the East Coast, but there was uncertainty as to how accurate that statement was. But we've kind of weathered the storms through COVID. Last year it was all virtual. This year it's all live. And it's going to, I don't know if people are familiar with the town of Fairfield, but it's going to be at the Bob's Store Plaza, which is on Post Road. And I probably should have memorized the address. But it's very close to exit 23 or 22 on 95. And it's going to run from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. There's going to be a parade beginning in Westport and ending at the Bob's Plaza. And then we have spaces for up to 50 electric vehicles. Too many Teslas, in my opinion, but I'm going to be the kind of the marshal of the parade, so I have to make sure that the Teslas are not all in a row. But we will have some vendors there. We'll be putting out information on TCI to try to persuade some of our legislators to get on board with that. But the intent over time was to make it broader than just electric vehicles, because like most towns, Fairfield is still in the high 90% of internal combustion engines. So we wanted to provide sustainable transportation solutions for everybody, including mass transit, ride sharing, and other things. I even wanted to have a mechanic to help people to tune up their engines so they could get better mileage. We haven't pulled that one off yet, but it should be fun for all. So 10 to 2 this Saturday. It looks like it's going to be a nice day, and hopefully we'll see some of you.
Sounds great. Thank you. I put a link in the chat to an article about your event. I hope it's the best one. But yeah, the parade sounds good. So you had Jay Leno at one
Virtually.
Pardon?
We had him virtually. Jim Modibali,
Okay.
who some of you may know, longtime environmental writer, is also a huge car buff, as is Jay Leno. So they went way back, and Jay was gracious to give us about an hour of his time for an interview. That's probably still on our website, but no celebs this year.
Okay. The Ridgefield Action Committee for the Environment is also hosting an EV event in October on October 17th, noon to 3. So come on up to Ridgefield, my home away from home. It's really going to be a great event. And I'd love for you all to meet the Ridgefield Action Committee for the Environment. They're doing some amazing things. And then I think also Daphne Dixon is having a webinar on October 14th that will, among other things, explain what programs there are, what incentives and rebates are becoming available for property owners, maybe municipalities, maybe schools, to install EV charging equipment. So, even if the charging unit itself won't be, isn't going to be erected at a particular time, the encouragement is to get that trenching done, get the wiring in, all that sort of stuff. So it's ready for the latest razzle dazzle charging unit to be attached to all of that, underground stuff. So I think, if you go to livegreenct.org, I think you should be able, or if you're on Daphne's email list, I think we'll all be hearing about that webinar that explains the incentives that are going to be available for installing those units. Does anybody else have other events that they'd like to describe? Kate, you must have one.
I must.
I bet you do.
We're doing well. We're fighting hard to stop Killingley. We did an energy efficiency workshop in Killingley, and only we showed up, and I think it was pretty disheartening considering the amount of outreach that we did. But we are still picketing every first and third Saturday from 11 to noon in Killingley, and there's an upcoming rally being planned on October 30th in Hartford to protest all fossil fuels. And that's being organized by Sierra Club and Martha Klein.
Great, thank you. I have an extended family member in New Jersey who's been fighting for 7 years the portion of the Penn East pipeline that was to go across her farm, and that was killed. It was just, I just read it this morning. So she said after 7 years, suddenly they're like, what? It worked? What?
Well, we've been 5.5 years into Killingley, and Bill McKibben said last week at a forum, we asked him about Killingley. He said 6 years and hold off for another year and you'll be able to stop it. And it is true that the Burrillville plant in Rhode Island took 6 years. So we're hoping that the market, it's a terrible investment. I don't know why anyone would invest in it, but so far as far as we know, they don't have any financing.
Well, hats off to you and your tenacity. It's so important. Thank you so much, Kate. Well, anybody else have any closing remarks? I think we're done. Thank you so much. I Heart My Home. You're awesome. Everybody's awesome.
Amazing.
Oh, Gavin, you're here. I should have asked you to talk about Ridgefield's event. I'm so sorry. So anyway, have a nice evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.